I just love business, and Talent Rover was a crash course on how to build a business because I'd never done it before. Learned a lot, got a lot of things right, got a lot of things wrong. Luckily, I got more things right than I got wrong. And it just kind of set the foundation of I want to do more.
Hey there, I'm Graham, and you're listening to the Sales Nerds Live podcast.
Like, I look at how frequently people change jobs now, and it terrifies me. It terrifies me because I know for me, I gained so much experience from being around longer and sometimes being extremely impatient going, I want to get promoted, I want to get promoted. But that time of waiting to get promoted and figuring out what else I needed to do to get that promotion and make it the right promotion and make it the right career step was so important.
On today's episode of Sales Nerds Live, host Graham Collins welcomes Brandon Metcalf. Brandon, a serial entrepreneur and current CEO of 3 Ventures, hosts a weekly podcast called Cash and Burn, which features SaaS founders and executives. Today, we're flipping the script. Graham asks Brandon to share his career journey and how to set your business, your team, and yourself up for success. Let's dive in. Sales Nerds Live is brought to you by your friends at QuotaPath. QuotaPath removes the manual lift out of sales commissions by automating the compensation process. We calculate and track your team's commissions, prepare them for payouts, and even give your reps the ability to forecast attainment and future earnings. We're the only solution loved by reps, leadership, and finance. Come nerd out with us on Sales Nerds Live.
All right, I believe that we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome again to this episode of Sales Nerds Live. As always, I'm Graham Collins, QuotaPath's Chief of Staff and Resident Sales Nerd, and currently Interim VP of Sales. I was telling Brandon before we went live here, I've been traveling to and from Austin, from Maine, pretty regularly this year already as the Interim VP of Sales. On my way home most recently, I got stuck overnight in Newark, which was a fun little thing that I got to experience. But that's not what we're talking about. Today, I'll be speaking with Brandon Metcalf, who's a serial entrepreneur and currently the CEO of 3 different ventures. He also hosts a weekly podcast called Cash and Burn, where he talks with SaaS founders and executives. Brandon, appreciate you joining me to share your career journey and how to set yourself, your team, and your business up for success. Welcome.
Thanks, Graham. I think you have more titles than I do, though.
Yeah, that's I know. Yours is fortunately just the one. I know. I keep rotating through titles. I like collecting them. They're like collecting cards, you know. So, well, Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? I'd love to learn about your background and you and what you're currently working on.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to give the Reader's Digest to give some context. So, out of school, I started in financial services and banking and did that for 6 or so years, and then stumbled into staffing and recruiting, and fell in love with staffing and recruiting, working a variety of leadership roles with Kelly Services across the country. And then I started working for a boutique headhunting firm in San Francisco. And long story short, got frustrated with the technology that we always had in staffing. I came up with a crazy idea of what if I just build a better solution. So in 2009, I started building what became a product in a company called Talent Rover, which was a staffing and recruiting operating system built on Salesforce, which back then everyone thought I was a little bit nuts for building on Salesforce, which maybe I was, but it worked. So launched Talent Rover, commercialized it in 2011. And then the first couple of years, had to figure out how to run a software company because me and my co-founder had zero experience in anything to do in software. So we started to figure it out. 2014, it started to take off. And then all of a sudden, we're off to the races where, we ended up having 9 offices in 8 countries. Inc. 500 rated us the 9th fastest growing software company in America in 2017. So lots going on. And I ended up selling that business in March of 2018 to our biggest competitor. And then I wanted to start a new endeavor to solve some of the challenges that I had while I was running Talent Rover when it came to financial forecasting, revenue recognition, billing, and even managing customer subscriptions. So I launched a company called Place. So we started developing that product in 2019 and went to market with it in 2020. At the same time, in 2018, a lot of people knew that, I was available, meaning I wasn't working at Bullhorn anymore. Not really realizing that I was building another software company. But I got a lot of people asking me for consulting. So business consulting, Salesforce consulting, staffing consulting, all that stuff. So that turned into like a $500,000 business right out of the gate. So I decided to turn that into a business, which now is my second business that I'm running, which is Blueprint Advisory. So not only was it doing the consulting work, we actually decided to turn Blueprint into the distribution SI, if you will, for Place. So it would do all the Place implementations, customizations, and all that. Because at Talent Rover, we did both product and services, which is something I would never do again. So then I recruited over a gentleman that worked with me. He really ran enterprise sales globally at Talent Rover named Greg Simmons to run Blueprint on a daily basis. And he's been doing that up until last year. So a couple years ago, we started to advise Salesforce on how to think about selling into staffing and recruiting. In the beginning of last year, we started building a new software company called Assemble, which is a applicant tracking, it's basically a staffing and recruiting solution, also built on Salesforce, but with a very different market approach, a strategy with that company. So that's my third company that's going on right now. Luckily, I moved Greg from Blueprint to run Assemble on a daily basis. And then we have a new president of Blueprint actually starting on Monday, which I'm super excited about. So now we're just trying to grow all three businesses.
Yeah, all three simultaneously. That's a rule of threes, I suppose. But I mean, you clearly love starting and growing businesses and have been very successful with it. What is it about entrepreneurship and starting businesses and growing them that drives you?
I've always just been fascinated with business, even as a kid. Like, just how does business work and why? My stepdad was running a pretty large concrete company, so I got to see, what that was like and how he thought about things, and it just really motivated me. So, when I was 14 or 15, I got my first job because I wanted to work, and then even on high school, the last two classes of the day, I did a work educational thing where I got to go work and manage the bookkeeping at a classified department at our local newspaper. So I got even more business. So I just loved business. And, Talent Rover was a crash course on how to build a business because I'd never done it before. Learned a lot, got a lot of things right, got a lot of things wrong. Luckily, I got more things right than I got wrong. And it just kind of set the foundation of, I want to do more. Like, I've never been the one that's shy to take a risk if I think it's a good risk. And a lot of the stuff that I've done to get to where I'm at was taking a lot of different risks.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about taking risks here in a minute. But one thing that I found interesting is that you've lived and worked in a bunch of different cities. I mean, I think in your LinkedIn post, you listed maybe 8 or 10 different cities that you lived and worked in, and currently in Austin. I have to imagine that's exposed you to various different cultures, various different experiences, different work environments and personalities. How have those diverse experiences shaped your personal and professional growth?
Yeah, I mean, it's been awesome. It's also part of the risk I was taking, right? So, I was born in Kentucky, and then my mom remarried, and we moved to Cleveland when I was like 6. They retired when I was still in high school, and we moved to Florida. I graduated high school, and then I moved to Orlando, go to school, and also to start working for the bank. I was really focused on how to build a career. So I had a conversation with an executive vice president saying, how do I get your job? And she was very nice to me. And she basically said, you want to grow, like, here are things you need to go do in order to grow your career. And I went and did those things. And, I was lucky. They gave me my first banking center to manage when I was 21 years old, which I look back now and go, oh, no, that's kind of terrifying. But then there was an opportunity where I could move to Chicago and help them open retail banks in Chicago because there wasn't any at the time. So I moved to Chicago to do that. And then I started getting a little bit bored because I was with the bank for about 6 years, and stumbled into a job posting for a sales manager with Kelly Financial Services, which is a division of Kelly Services in Denver. So I took the risk, moved to Denver, was there for a year and a half or so, did really well. They sent me to Sacramento to rebuild that market. Did well there. 6 months after that, they sent me to San Francisco to run San Francisco and then in the northern part of California. Like, all of those moves were risky, right? Because it's taking a chance on myself that I can go do a brand new job at a new company, reestablishing myself in a new city, not knowing anyone, having to make friends and sorting through all of that. And then, building the businesses, doing well and figuring out where I wanted to go. And, I ended up moving from San Francisco to Chicago because we had incorporated Talent Rover in San Francisco, and I wanted to move it to scale. So we moved it to Chicago to scale, sold it. Was going to move back to San Francisco, but since I was starting a new tech company, it's like, well, why would you move back to San Francisco if you moved the last one? So where else do you go if you're going to launch a tech company but Austin, Texas? And here we are in Austin. So, but then also like with Talent Rover, we were not afraid to take a risk either as far as opening in different countries. So we opened a second office of Talent Rover in the UK in London, probably I think in like year 2 or 3. And then we opened an office in Dublin, we opened an office in Hyderabad, and then Hong Kong, and then Sydney, Australia, and Tokyo. So not only figuring out culture in the United States from doing business in the US, but also from living in different places. I think the biggest cultural experience is learning how to do business around the world. And we also at TR won a relationship with the Adecco Group and pretty much won their global relationship with them. So like I was constantly going to different countries, seeing how they do business, why they do business that way, what's important. And it's one of the best ways to actually get I think a broader, deeper business view is travel and really see how people interact with each other, what's different about how they interact with each other, and what really drives them. So I've been pretty fortunate with all that.
Yeah. Do you have not to pick favorites, do you have a favorite country to work in? Do you have one that's like, that always stands out to you?
Well, my favorite city in the world, and I've been to a lot, is London. Like, I just absolutely love London. With Talent Rover, I was there off and on for about 6 months a year. But I absolutely love Austin, Texas as well. Like, we built a home here. We love it here. It's a little hot, but that's fine. I'd rather be hot than cold. But
not me. That's what drove me out. That's what made me end up leaving Austin. I was in Austin for 8 years and then moved to Maine. So
I was going to say, moving to Maine is very, very different from the state of Texas.
It is. Well, I grew up here, so it's I got thick blood, I suppose. But and so on the value of taking risks, you're talking about all of these risks as if they all worked out perfectly for you. Clearly, a lot of them worked out really well for you, but one of the downsides of risks is that they can fail. Have there been any instances where the risks have blown up in your face or failed, and what did that do for you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's setback along the way, and anyone that you look at and you think they're successful, they've had more challenge than they've had success. They've just figured out how to continue pushing the path forward. And I do genuinely believe that, it's the people that can overcome the setbacks and can just continue to march forward that are truly the successful people that do great things. I think we were in a big rush with Talent Rover to open a lot of our international offices, especially the international offices in Asia. Hong Kong, Sydney, and Tokyo. They were never really the right spot for us to be in from a commercial standpoint, just because the type of product we were selling at the price point we were selling just didn't really work there. So that's one of the biggest setbacks, I think. But at the end, it still worked. It just cost us more money than in reality it should have at this point.
Sure. Yeah. That's interesting, and I think that's a good point. Is that like, it's easy to point to somebody and be like, oh, they just had successes, but it's what you do with those risks and those failures that really determine your success.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I always talk about that is why I've done the things that I've done is in finding people that will invest in you and investing in those people that invest in you. And what I mean, so like that conversation about that with that EVP at the bank way back when I was like 20, her taking the interest in actually helping this 20-year-old kid, like who wants to go do big things, and saying, this is what you need to do. And then me investing back saying, I'm not going to waste your time. I'm actually going to go do those things you asked me to do and prove that I can do them. And it was this give and take, like, okay, I achieved my part. You need to give me what I achieved, and I'm going to go do more, and we're going to play this game. It was the same thing at the recruiting firm that I was at in San Francisco, CV Partners, with, the CEO of that company, Kent Gray. He and I developed a friendship. He recruited me to come work for him, but we weren't super close. So when I came to him and said, I think I can build a software for us to use internally, like I had never built a software, nor been in software at all. I've always been in banking and staffing. And I built together a plan of why and how and all of that. And he took the risk and he said, okay, let's do this. Let's see if this can work. And then about 6 months later, when I had the conversation with them of like, I have a crazier idea. What if we commercialize this thing and turn it into a company? That was even a bigger risk. And then all through building that company, it was this give and take of us supporting each other, challenging each other, that really got me to where like Talent Rover was successful. I could exit it and go do all the things that I do now. So that's like the biggest piece of career advice is like, find someone that will really invest in you and hold on to it, and don't just take, but give more than you take, because they'll keep giving back to you.
This goes to the whole team building concept as well. You've built a lot of teams and a number of teams. You subscribe to that. You give more than you take, and you give back. Does that apply to the way that you think about team building as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think team building is fun and hard at the same time. Like, I think there's a sense of working with each other really to solve a joint problem. And like, I think a mindset really matters. Like another thing I learned from Kent back at CV Partners is whenever we would be out and he would introduce me to someone, it was like, this is Brandon, he works with me. Not this is Brandon, he works for me. And that's like that stuck with me. That really makes your colleague feel valued and equal, and shows how you really think about them. And subtle things like that go a long way. Also figuring out personalities. Like I'm a big fan of Culture Index because it helps you understand how people are hardwired. I have a very, very dominant high A personality. I'm very autonomous. Let's just go, 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 go. And I have a slightly low emotional profile where I don't wear my emotions on my sleeve, especially like when I'm stressed. I get very stone cold face and let's just go like focus. And, that can come across intimidating and challenging for the team, where figuring out who do I need on the team to balance me out? How do I interact with people? What makes people feel connected and what makes them feel disconnected? And focusing my team building around who needs to be on this boat with me, because I'm not good at all things, and I should be the first that I admit that. I'm great at some things, but how do I plug the holes? And plugging the holes isn't just from a like functional, like I need an accountant or I need this type of functional person. It's also a personality. Like what culture are we trying to drive here, and who's going to get along with who, and how do we communicate? It's one of the reasons why I like Culture Index, because it teaches you how to communicate with everyone on your team.
That's cool. But I'm not familiar with Culture Index. I've used other personality tests and I think that the DISC surveys and whatnot, and that's been helpful for me to understand how to interact with people and build teams as well. So, so kind of on the couple of points here. Hiring, when I did a lot of interviewing while I was hiring at my previous company, I ran about a 45-person SDR team. And so that meant a lot of interviewing and a lot of hiring. One of my favorite questions to ask people was, what question do you wish I would ask you? Or like, what question are you like really teed up to answer that you hope I ask you? So you do a podcast, you talk with SaaS founders and you talk with them about turning failures into successes and all kinds of great business things. But I'm sure there are questions that you ask people, or maybe just a great question that you've asked in the past that you wish somebody would ask you. So this is my opportunity for you to ask you a question. What is that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I always get fascinated with why people do what they do. Like what really drives the motivation. Like, for example, when I sold Talent Rover, why in the world did I want to go create another software company and go through the whole journey?
Why go again? Why do it all over again, right?
Much less 3 companies and trying to do it. And it's that motivation. And the reason why I like the why question is I want to understand, like, what's the passion? What's driving it? I love building companies. I love solving problems. Problem solving is probably the number one thing that I love. Of like, I know how painful this, like in the world of place, right? I know how painful when you're building a SaaS company, how painful it is to manage subscriptions that then tie to RevRec, that then tie to billing, that then tie to your financial forecasts, and that then you can communicate back to your entire team, which is why we built it inside of Salesforce. It's like if your sales and account management and almost all your leadership team is inside of Salesforce, why not bring this information to them and then give them all the metrics and analytics so that they can understand what's happening with the business? So as you start to conceptualize like the challenge that I was living at Talent Rover with the potential of solving another problem, that's why I wanted to do it. I also now have a desire to help other people do it. Like, big thing for me is helping my leadership team grow and to develop into better leaders. And, one of the tricks that I have to do all the things that I do is having that leadership team. So like I was talking about Greg moving from Blueprint to Assemble. There's 100% trust there. Like we talk constantly. He's constantly asking me questions. I'm asking him questions, but there's never a question of like, what are you doing? What are you not doing? Blah, blah, blah. Because there's that level of trust and communication there. The leadership team I have at place, I have 4 VPs that are incredibly capable of running their own thing. My job is to set the overall vision of, hey, this is where we need to go. How can I help you get there? And trying to spend as much time as possible, not giving them the answer, but showing them how to find the answer so that they can run the ship without me. And I get a lot of passion and joy from that, because that's really how I was groomed to get to where I'm at.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that's a good answer to a good question. Are you an easily bored person? You talked about, getting bored after 6 years at the bank. Would you describe yourself as somebody who's easily bored?
I mean, I like to be challenged, but I can be challenged in a lot of different ways. With the bank, I kind of looked around and I was like, everyone's been here for like 20 or 30 years. Like I'm too young to like this be where I want to be for the next 20 to 30 years. I think banking is a great profession, but I just knew I wanted to be challenged more. I think that's also why moving to staffing was really exciting, because it was a whole different challenge. And then from staffing to software was a different challenge. And from software to building companies has been a bit bigger challenge. And from going from being a CEO of a company to now I want to kind of be like a chairman of multiple companies eventually is where I'm going. That's my growth. But I think there's needed time in each area. Like I look at how frequently people change jobs now, and it terrifies me. It terrifies me because I know for me, I gained so much experience from being around longer, and sometimes being extremely impatient going, I want to get promoted. I want to get promoted. But that time of waiting to get promoted and figuring out what else I needed to do to get that promotion and make it the right promotion and make it the right career step was so important. So like looking back at my past, there's a couple career things I could question, but for the most part, I've been really happy with all the career steps I've made, because as much as I am an impatient person in a lot of ways, and my leadership team will definitely tell you I'm impatient on certain things, there's a process, and I'm trying to learn as much as I can of the hows and the whys, and I'm trying to figure out the different pieces. And early in my career, someone gave me really bad advice that I'm glad I didn't follow. And she's like, you're too much of a generalist. You need to be the specialist on one thing. And for me, I'm like, why? Like, I don't want to be a specialist on one thing. People who are specialists at one thing, awesome, go do that one thing. I'm like, I want to understand all things. And I knew I eventually wanted to be a CEO. I'm like, a CEO has to understand the whole company, not just one piece. So if I'm a specialist, how will I ever get there? So it's taking that type of stuff and then trying to visualize where you want to be. But yeah, it's been a fun ride.
Yeah. I the reason I ask about the whether you're easily bored is that something that I fall victim to. And now part of it is hobbies. I feel like I pick up I collect hobbies. So I pick up new hobbies every once in a while. But part of it as well is roles, and similarly, like being a generalist. I currently running the sales org. My previous role at QuotaPath was running the marketing team. And then before that, I was doing partnerships. And then before that, I was doing the RevOps, and I did some of the finance, everything but coding, essentially. I haven't done any code, haven't pushed any code yet, but with the...
should I call AJ and say you want to do some coding now?
Yeah, well, I mean, with the advent of all of this AI coding stuff, I feel like I could probably do it before long. But I was just curious whether because for me, moving on, like I've only had 3 jobs, really, 3 different companies, essentially. And each time, the major reason for me leaving was that I felt like I wasn't learning anything. I'm a very curious person, and you sound similar, very curious. And so once I stopped learning, and once it just became repetitive, and like, there's something to be said about honing your skills, but like not learning anything new, I'm just going through the motions. That was the point where I was like, okay, it's time for me to move on.
Yeah, I think it's also the responsibility of the company to keep you engaged. And if they're not, I do think that's why people leave. Most people leave because they have a bad manager, but it's not always the case. Sometimes you can have a great manager, but you're just not being challenged anymore. If I'm not challenged, I would definitely start to... I would find ways to be challenged, which could be disruptive in the company, that I would start doing things that other people are supposed to be doing and probably lead to bad things.
Fair enough. That's why you're the CEO. You're allowed to do. Well, so one question, I know we're nearing the end here, but one question that beforehand, I was asking you like, oh, how are things going with the staffing firm? And I said, oh, well, we're in this really uncertain time. And so staffing must be really rough right now. And then you were quick to correct me that staffing and recruiting are not the same thing. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on like the industry where we work is going through a rough spot. How do you keep the team focused? How do you keep motivated? How do you keep growing?
Yeah, I mean, so for clarity, like I don't have a staffing firm. I used to work for one. I have a staffing software
yes.
now.
Software for staffing firms, yes.
Yeah, so we get to see and hear what's going on. But I know the space really well because I spend so much time in staffing. Look, the labor market's still super interesting, right? Because unemployment's still really low. Tech layoffs continue to go higher. Cost of labor is still really high at this point. I think you're seeing people more hunker down than move, which is a big change from the Great Resignation to, everyone kind of trying to stay put. I'm hoping that we get to more of a state of normal where it's a good labor market, but, it's not such a crazy labor market that anyone can ask for whatever salary they want and they have to get it, because that's just going to kill business. At the same time, people should be paid for the work that they're doing in a fair manner. And companies just shouldn't hoard all of the profits. I think it's part of the overall economic landscape right now. Where are we? I think in the beginning of the year and the end of last year, there was so much hype about doomsday is here and all of that. We really didn't see it. We're starting to, I think, see it more and more now. And, there's always these conversations around, are we going to have a hard landing? We're going to have soft landing. We're going to have no landing. It's like, what's a landing? And now it's the recession word and all of that. And, I've learned a long time ago that you've got to focus on the things you can control and don't get obsessed with the things you can't control. And this is a good example with the economic climate or the labor market in general. Like there's things you just can't control. But what can you control and how do you focus on trying to do your best to get to where you need to be? If we are going into recession, there's been a lot of amazing businesses that have been built during it. I guess the question would be for how long and how deep does it go, which the common theme seems to be it's not going to go that long or that deep. I don't know. I'm not an economist. I'm just trying to run some companies, but and focused on doing right by customers and growing the business. But I think to answer your question, staffing and recruiting is an interesting market because if you think about when economies are booming and everyone needs to hire and you can't find candidates, that's where you see the permanent side of staffing and recruiting take off, where they're going to go finding candidates you can't find. When economy turns down and everyone's laying off and no one can justify full-time permanent hires, a lot of companies flip to contract and temporary staffing because it goes onto a different part of the profit and loss. So temporary staffing goes up. So if you're a staffing and recruiting firm and you do both perm and temp, you kind of get to ride the wave out and switch focus on the business as it goes. So it's a really interesting, somewhat recession type proof industry.
Yeah, that is interesting. All right. Only a couple minutes left here. I have my classic questions, my last 3 questions that I ask everybody. So we can kind of rapid fire through these. Number 1, what piece of advice would you give yourself on your first day of your career?
Be patient and listen.
Okay. Be patient and listen. Do you feel like you didn't do that early on? Or is this just, if you could hammer it into yourself even further, that would be beneficial?
It's just my nature. I'm like, let's go. I can figure this out. Just let me go. And, on day 1, be a little bit more patient and listen. Maybe day 2, start to push the envelope, but definitely day 1, slow down.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. And then number 2, if you weren't doing what you currently do, what else would you be doing?
I'd be a chef. So I almost was a chef before I started this whole software endeavor where I got to apprentice under a couple really amazing chefs and was torn about what I wanted to do. And ultimately my love for business won out because, of course there's successful chefs that are great business people as well. But I decided to make it more of a passion. So like whenever I get stressed out and I have like a day, I will spend 4 to 6 hours just locking myself in the kitchen and cooking some crazy ass thing that takes me all day to cook. That's
great. I like that. And lastly, what are you watching, reading, or listening to right now?
I read a lot of Slack and emails. No, but seriously, I'm reading a book right now called Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. I definitely recommend it if you're an entrepreneur. And then I'm obsessed with Succession, so I'm a little bit bummed this is the last season. But those are the big things. Otherwise, I'm usually working.
Yeah, on Slack and email. Yeah. All right. Awesome. Any plugs at the end here? Anything for any of the various different businesses you want to let folks know about?
I mean, I could talk to you an hour about that, but we're seeing one of the exciting things that we're seeing with Place specifically is we're helping companies find what really is revenue leakage. For like example, one of our clients, they've been invoicing out of Stripe, and we helped them realize that they've been missing hundreds of thousands of dollars that they should have been invoicing, that Stripe doesn't align to their contracts, and we actually normalize all of that and connect the dots, and then they can visualize it. So we solved that problem, which makes me really excited, because as everyone's looking right now at tech and what's going on in the world and how do we cut back, we actually have a product that helps you find money, which is kind of the key to the game right now. So excited about what we're doing there.
That's great. How do folks find Place?
Placetechnology.com is the easiest way. My LinkedIn, you can definitely find all the stuff that I'm working on. It's kind of a hub for everything I do. But yeah, placetechnology.com.
Awesome. And then on our side, of course, QuotaPath, commission tracking. We a couple of months ago launched a free trial that allows you to do your commission tracking for 30 days for free. That's big, especially because we're coming up on the end of the month here, and commissions, especially for folks on an offset quarter. You're going to be going through that right now, which is a pain. So check that out, quotapath.com. And if you do need help building a comp plan, we have Comp Hub, which is comp.quotapath.com, allows you to model and build comp plans by just entering a few pieces of information in, and don't even need to enter an email address. So it's pretty great. Brandon, really appreciate you. This was great. And next time I'm in Austin, I'll have to see if you have time for a beer or a coffee or something.
Definitely. Thanks for having me on.
A fancy meal, now that I know that about you. That's tempting. So.
Wait, I'm not cooking.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Awesome. Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, y'all.